Turns out I didn't think it mattered is the most expensive sentence in the English language, and these 29 people found out the hard way. Moment 1. Picture a perfectly functional apartment. Rent paid, walls intact, no visible disasters. Then the tenant decides not to document anything when they move in. No photos, no checklist, no walkthrough notes. Just vibes and trust. 6 months later, they move out and lose the entire security deposit to damages that were already there on day one. The landlord has photos from their last tenant. The new tenant has nothing but a confident memory and a suddenly empty savings account. Documentation takes 11 minutes. 11 minutes. Moment 2. Someone gets a free trial notification in their inbox, clicks through, enters their card details, and genuinely believes that the word free means something permanent. 30 days later, the subscription charges begin. 90 days later, they notice. By then, they've paid for a service they haven't opened since the first Tuesday. The cancel button was always there. It was always right there. Moment 3. A person buys a used car without getting a pre-purchase inspection from an independent mechanic. The seller seemed nice, the car looked clean, the check engine light was, and this is a direct quote from actual humans, probably nothing. 3 weeks and $4,000 in transmission repairs later, they are now an expert on why inspections exist. $80 inspection, $4,000 lesson. You do the math. Moment 4. Someone skips reading their health insurance policy and then expresses genuine shock, jaw on the floor, eyes wide with betrayal, when an out-of-network provider bills them separately. The explanation of benefits document exists. It is not a novel. It is not written in another language. It is, however, apparently invisible to anyone who assumes their coverage is basically whatever I need. Moment 5. A homeowner notices a small water stain on the ceiling. Small, just a little one. Probably condensation. Probably fine. They paint over it twice. They paint over it twice before the ceiling begins to sag, and the insurance adjuster uses the phrase long-term water intrusion damage in a voice that costs $12,000 to hear in full. Small stain. Enormous stain, actually. The stain was always enormous. They just couldn't see the part that mattered. Moment 6. Someone withdraws money from their retirement account early to cover what they describe as an emergency. That under examination is a vacation. They pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty, the income taxes on the full withdrawal amount, and lose all future compound growth on that money. They funded a trip they don't fully remember with money they definitely needed later. Be honest, have you ever watched someone do this and said nothing? Moment 7. A person co-signs a loan for someone they love and trust completely. They love and trust them so much that they don't read the terms of what co-signing legally means. Here is what it legally means. If the primary borrower stops paying, you are the primary borrower now. The bank does not care about your relationship. The bank does not attend your family dinners. The bank sends statements. Moment 8. Someone pays only the minimum balance on their credit card every single month and feels responsible about it because, technically, they are paying something. Meanwhile, a 23% interest rate is compounding quietly in the background like a patient predator. $500 of original debt, 4 years of minimum payments, still carrying $400 of balance. This is not bad luck. This is arithmetic with feelings attached to it. Moment 9. A person hires a contractor based entirely on the fact that they were cheap and available immediately. No contract, no written quote, no references checked. The project begins. The project changes. New costs emerge that were apparently obvious to everyone except the person whose home it is. Verbal agreement becomes a phrase repeated with increasing desperation into an unresponsive void. The contractor finishes eventually. The bill does not resemble any number previously discussed. And somehow we're still warming up. Moment 10. Someone gets a notice that their property taxes are being reassessed and ignores it because those envelopes always look boring and official and probably fine. They are not fine. The reassessment went through. The new amount is significantly higher. The window to appeal has closed. It closes every year at the same time. Has been closing at the same time for decades. This is not new information that caught anyone by surprise. Moment 11. A person buys a house without shopping multiple lenders and simply takes the rate their bank offers because they already have a checking account there and it feels easier. The difference between their rate and a slightly better rate available 45 minutes of comparison shopping away is approximately $18,000 over the life of the loan. $18,000. In exchange for 45 minutes of mild inconvenience. This transaction is available to everyone. Most people decline it. Moment 12. Someone gets in a minor fender bender, decides to handle it privately without involving insurance to avoid a rate increase, pays the other driver $2,000 in cash on the spot, and receives in return absolutely no documentation whatsoever. 2 weeks later, the other driver files an injury claim with their insurance anyway. The insurance company's position on the cash arrangement is eloquent and brief. Not their problem, moment 13. A person sets up automatic bill pay, changes banks, and forgets to update the payment information on 3 recurring bills. The payments fail. The accounts go delinquent. The credit score drops. The person discovers this 6 months later when they are denied a loan and are presented with a credit report that looks like a highlights reel of administrative oversight. The bills were small. The consequences were not moment 14. Someone buys a brand new car instead of a 2-year-old certified pre-owned vehicle and drives it off the lot into an immediate 11% depreciation event. They have owned this car for a combined distance of approximately 2 city blocks, and it is already worth less than they paid for it. This is not a secret. This is not hidden information. Every personal finance resource on the internet mentions this. It appears to be mentioned to no effect, moment 15. A person receives a legal notice and puts it in the pile. There is always a pile. The pile contains things that require attention and have not received it. Legal notices do not become less urgent when placed in piles. They become court dates. They become default judgments. They become wage garnishments for amounts that could have been resolved with a single phone call during business hours on any of the 45 days prior to the deadline. Would you like to know how many people have a pile right now? This next one defies logic, moment 16. Someone goes out to eat, receives genuinely good service, and then calculates the tip based on the pre-tax total rather than the full amount, saves approximately $2, and considers this financial wisdom. Meanwhile, they are paying a monthly subscription to a streaming service they last opened during a different presidential administration. The math here is technically correct and morally exhausting. Moment 17. A person lists their home for sale by owner to save the commission, prices it based on emotional attachment and a rough memory of what their neighbor's house sold for in 2019, and watches it sit on the market for 4 months while carrying costs accumulate. They eventually hire an agent, drop the price, and close the sale having spent more than a commission's worth of time, mortgage payments, and reduced final price in the pursuit of saving the commission. The math on this one is genuinely upsetting. Moment 18. Someone gets a 0% interest credit card offer for 18 months, uses it as intended, but misses the fine print that says any balance remaining at month 19 is subject to deferred interest, meaning all interest from all 18 months is added at once. At month 19, they are introduced to a concept called deferred interest in the least enjoyable possible context. 0% was in the headline. The rest was in the document. Both were sent to the same address. Moment 19. A person invests a meaningful sum of money into a business idea brought to them by someone they met recently who radiates energy and uses the phrase ground floor opportunity with great frequency. There is no business plan. There are projected returns. The returns are described verbally in a parking lot. No money returns. The person who radiated energy is no longer reachable by phone. Be honest, you have either seen this or you know someone who has seen this. Moment 20. Someone buys a vacation timeshare at a resort presentation after a 4-hour sales session and 2 free cocktails because the math on the brochure made it look like it would pay for itself in saved vacation costs. The math on the brochure was created by people whose professional purpose is to make this math look convincing. The maintenance fees begin immediately. The resale value is, famously and universally, approximately 0. The cocktails were fine. Moment 21. A person takes out a personal loan at a high interest rate to pay off credit card debt, feels relieved, and then slowly rebuilds the credit card balance over the next 18 months while still carrying the personal loan. They now have both debts. They consolidated without changing the behavior that created the first debt. This is not a debt solution. This is debt multiplication with extra steps and a temporary emotional reward. Moment 22. Someone files their taxes themselves, misses a deduction they qualified for, never finds out, and overpays by several $100s across multiple years. Slightly worse version, someone files their own taxes, makes a mathematical error, and doesn't notice until the IRS notice arrives with late penalties and interest attached. Both of these outcomes were preventable for the cost of a mid-range dinner. The IRS, for the record, is not interested in how confident you felt about your arithmetic. Moment 23. A person skips renter's insurance because they don't own that much stuff. Then they do a quick mental inventory of everything in their apartment, laptop, television, furniture, clothes, the bicycle in the hallway, and arrive at a total that is considerably higher than they expected. Then something happens, a pipe bursts. A break-in occurs. A neighbor's cooking experiment gets ambitious. Renter's insurance costs less per month than most people spend on coffee in a single week. The comparison is almost insulting in how obvious it is. Moment 24. Someone ignores the annual fee on a credit card they don't use anymore because canceling it feels complicated. The fee charges. Then it charges again the next year, and the next. They have now paid more in fees for this card than they ever received in rewards from it. The card is sitting in a drawer somewhere, technically active, technically costing money, technically a choice being made passively every single year. This one is somehow worse because it requires no action to keep happening. Moment 25. A person gets a significant inheritance, receives it as a lump sum, and makes three major financial decisions in the first 30 days while in a state of emotional shock and unfamiliar optimism. One of those decisions is an investment in something a relative mentioned at the funeral. No due diligence was conducted at the funeral. Funerals are not financial planning environments. The money does not know it came from grief. It leaves just as easily as any other money. Moment 26. Someone sues a neighbor in small claims court over a dispute worth $400, wins, and collects nothing because the neighbor has no collectible assets and no intention of compliance. They have now spent 6 months in conflict, several hours in court, considerable stress, and a permanent hostile relationship with the person who lives 11 feet from their front door. To recover a judgment that exists entirely on paper, the $400 was never coming back. It was not coming back before the lawsuit either, but at least before the lawsuit, the neighbor waived. Moment 27. A person takes a balance transfer offer to move high-interest debt to a 0% card, pays the 3% transfer fee, and then, and this is where it becomes almost artistic in its self-sabotage, uses the card with the newly zero balance for new purchases, triggering a non-promotional interest rate on the new spending while their minimum payments get applied to the 0% balance first. They have optimized themselves into paying more interest on new charges than they were paying before the transfer. The bank sent a 12-page document explaining how this worked. The document was received. It was not opened. Moment 28. Someone refinances their mortgage to lower their monthly payment, celebrates, and does not notice that the new loan term resets the amortization clock. They were 12 years into a 30-year mortgage. They are now back at year one of a new 30-year mortgage. Their monthly payment is lower. Their total interest paid over the life of both loans combined is catastrophically higher. They saved $300 a month and spent $60,000 extra dollars doing it. The paperwork was there. The total cost of borrowing was a line in the document. It was a very small line. Moment 29. And here we arrive at the peak, the summit, the entry that makes every previous entry look like a minor clerical inconvenience. A person receives a notice that they have unclaimed funds sitting in a state unclaimed property database from an old closed bank account, a forgotten utility deposit, or an employer overpayment from years ago. They assume it's a scam, they throw it away. The money sits in the database, fully available, fully theirs, publicly searchable, requiring approximately 10 minutes and a government ID to claim. They do not claim it. The state holds unclaimed property indefinitely. It is a searchable public database. It has been a searchable public database. It will continue to be a searchable public database. And somewhere right now, someone is throwing away the letter. There is a version of every one of these stories where the outcome is different, where the person reads the document, asks the question, takes the 11 minutes, gets the inspection, and walks away with their money intact and their dignity unthreatened. The information was almost always available. The opportunity to do the obvious thing was almost always present. What is consistently absent is the small, uncomfortable act of paying attention before the consequences make it mandatory. So here is the question worth sitting with. Which one of these hit closest to home? And if you've seen something worse, something that somehow exceeds number 29 on the scale of preventable financial self-destruction, drop it in the comments. The world needs to know. If this list made you feel even slightly more financially competent by comparison, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear number 3 before it's too late.